all areas.
Could you address maybe sort of the value proposition that Ian brought up of like you want to deliver value, but then there's also the sort of like no cost, no value. So what are the dangers when like good design choices make it too easy? So it's like, oh, I can buy this thing and I feel like I'm doing good in the world, or it's like I can click on something and then like I'm doing good in the world. And how do you make it show that it's still hard to change things and make that valuable?
That's a great question.
I mean, obviously, this has been a very heated debate with many commentators wading in, most notably Malcolm Gladwell, who argued in The New Yorker that basically social media only generates weak ties that can't be compared to the social activism of taking to the streets in the 60s. I think, the Spring Revolution across Arab nations, on the other side of the world demonstrated that it does play a significant contributory role. And I think it would be a mistake to judge the potential of this technology based solely on its use today. 80% of people, if not 90%, use a lot of this technology as idle distraction, entertainment, talking about their lunch. But the ability of people to connect in real time all around the world about what they care about is potentially transformative. But we do need to drive this conversation. We can take our hands off the wheel and just let all this technology be another sort of iteration of how clever we are, but really don't engage it, for social change on any scale. And there's a book that came out recently, The Moral Consequences of the Global Economic Meltdown. And the research in that book said, as the economy got worse, our moral behavior got worse. By the same token, as the economy gets stronger, we're more inclined to be generous and think of the greater good. So we have a responsibility to choose whether we drive this conversation, we engage this technology in the right direction, or do we say it's going to happen organically and let's hope it ends up there, or we take our hands off the wheel altogether and say it's not my problem. So I don't agree that it encourages slacktivism, but even notwithstanding that, we still need to steer the conversation in the right direction. And my hope would be that in 10 years' time, our children are sitting there going, of course, Procter & Gamble and Nestle and whoever else it might be are custodians for this cause. Of course, Patagonia and Nike are major players in the environmental world. Why? Because that makes us like the brand, which makes us want to buy their products, which improves their bottom line. And that's a role that we all have to play if we want to see that happen.
I think it provides entry points, right? I mean, quite frankly, your point about going from like the Arab Spring right now that's happening versus activism over the last 20, 30, 40 years, we still need entry points, right? People doing that, I would say, is it bad? Is it detrimental? No. I don't think it's detrimental. It's an entry point that we hope to transition people through deeper engagement, which comes from, quite frankly, real experiences, earned experiences that are aligned with my values, right? So if it's an entry point into better behaviors, fantastic. If that's where they lay, at least they've done something. If they get deeper into it, even better with some of the work Jeremy's doing to engage people over time. That's where people need the kind of entry points to allow them to kind of make small changes and see that impact. And I think that's a great starting point.
And we've had significant markers in the last few years. I think a lot of people were encouraged how connected citizens were responsible in the last presidential election, and we know that it'll be very consequential whoever wins in the next presidential election. We've had another example about people rallying in protest around the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. We've had another example with the Arab nations and the Spring Revolution. On a massive scale, we've seen the global community engage in ways that we really haven't seen before. So it's not like this is all theory. We really do have some examples out there where I know I took heart from the fact that a lot of people put their hand up and said, this is what I care about and I'm engaged with this issue on a scale that I haven't seen before. So I do believe we have some examples to draw on to take confidence from.
So we have time only for one more question.
I think 16 years ago, Fidel Castro of Cuba unofficially visited Japan. Actually, his plane had some mechanical problem. And the Japanese press asks him, China and Vietnam was getting more rich. How about Cuba? And Fidel Castro said, if everybody living in China and Vietnam will ride automobile, what happen in the world? I think every nation has a right to enjoy economic prosperity, but Still, I cannot get an answer for Federal Castro's response. Probably, I think DIPCA cannot settle the issue. And do you think how to reconcile such problem in the world?
If you look at the emerging middle classes that are happening, that are growing out of India, Africa, and in China as well, that's where we're sat here talking a lot today about the US and about the EU. That's where the change is going to happen, right? Fundamentally, you look at, actually, Jan Chipchase at Frog has done amazing work when he was at Nokia before around mobile payments and mobile infrastructures and how we're changing the way we bank. That happened in Africa 10 years ago because there are no landlines, right? Because if we have landlines, they tear the copper down and they steal it. These areas of the world that are being developed right now, that's where we actually have to put our hopes, to be honest, and our energy. Because if they make the change around the infrastructure that they're building today, whether it be telecommunications infrastructure, automotive infrastructure, urban infrastructure, that is what will affect what happens here. We're actually at the point where we are no longer, driving what's going to happen. We're going to have to see what happens in those emerging economies and allow that experimentation to play out and hope, and with a whole lot of hope and our fingers crossed, that they make the right choices, that infrastructure gets built in the right way, and that the right behaviors get modeled, because on some scale, to your point, we're still a very small island in a very big world, and they're moving very fast.
And the inspiring thing is that certainly in the work that we're doing, we're seeing these huge engaged communities in some of the places where 5 years ago we weren't. So in a place like Brazil, avaz.org, which is one of the groups that I co-founded, has more than 1 million members now, and those people are taking action on global issues. They're highly engaged by those things. To Ian's point, the tools might be different in some of these countries. So, you might go straight to mobile technologies. But to his point earlier as well, let's not get fixated by the tools. That's really not what it's about. It's actually about it's about the people taking action and being highly engaged. So I think it'll be interesting to see, which of these emerging economies, kind of builds these vibrant civil societies and social movements, and which don't, and how those things change the global debate.
So I'm gonna thank the three of you. Mr. Azami from MUJI USA is gonna come up and say a few words, but let me reintroduce as we say goodbye, Ian Roberts from IDEO, yes. Jeremy Hyman from Purpose.com, Simon Waring, and don't forget to read his book, We First, came out this week. So thank you all, very interesting. And now we'd like to introduce Mr. Azami from MUJI USA, the president.
There he is.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Ryohin Keikak and the entire MUJI family, I wish to thank you for coming out tonight to join us for this very interesting and important discussion among such thoughtful and enlightened thinkers. Thank you, Robin, Ian, Jeremy, and Simon. The topic of designing more with less is the root of the MUJI philosophy. 30 years ago, we created MUJI based upon principles that seem obvious today, but were very radical at that moment. Based upon the globalization of our economies and the sharing of our limited natural resources, the way we consume everything should be a top priority for all citizens of the world. There are 7 billion people on the earth, but only few enjoy modern consumerism. We need to create a new paradigm for consumption. Being MUJI is to become a conscious consumer who does not sacrifice style and taste, but one who is also concerned with less waste. we hope that this evening was both stimulating and empowering for you, and that this will be the beginning of many more MUJI events and important discussions like this one. We would like to give special thanks to Courtney and Albert from ADEO, New York office, Pratt Institute, Professor Ms. Anita Cooney, Mr. Takiura, and the 12 grad students. Thank you for collaboration of interior design project with MUJI. I would like to close my speech and this session quoting William Gibson's remark, "The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet." I hope you feel and find the future in this session tonight. Thank you again for being with us, and very good night.